It is a project of superlatives. The Bi-Oceanic Corridor is to connect the whole of South America for the first time and create a link between the east and west coasts. Many are already talking about it as an alternative to the Panama Canal, and the countries of South America want to join the select circle of top economic powers. And it is also a project in which the various geopolitical players are involved. Not only has China bought into the project from the outset with generous investments, but Germany is now also involved. So what is this megaproject all about? How could it change global trade, and when could it be completed? We take a look at all these exciting questions in today's video. In the era of globalization, networking within continents plays an increasingly important role for the economy and transport. We can see this particularly well in Europe, where Germany in particular, as an export nation, benefits from the very fast transportation routes. And South America also wants to open up further to global trade and initially strengthen intracontinental trade. However, South America has a very different starting point to Europe, which is mainly due to the sheer size of the continent. The EU, Europe's most important trading center, has an area of approximately 4 million square kilometers. If you add all the countries of Europe, including the European part of Russia, you end up with an area of around 10 million square kilometers. If we look at South America, on the other hand, the continent covers over 17 million square kilometers, almost twice as much as the whole of Europe and over 4 times as much as the EU. The transportation routes are correspondingly long. In addition, the terrain in South America is much less suitable for the exchange of goods. On the one hand, we have the huge Amazon region, which is barely developed and where there are no major transit routes. But the huge Andes mountain range, which separates the west coast from the east, also makes trade within South America more difficult. All the more impressive is the planned Bi-Oceanic Corridor, an infrastructural project of monumental proportions that aims to overcome these barriers and create an efficient trade route between the Atlantic and Pacific coasts. But how did the project get on the agenda in the first place? Peru made its first foray in the year 2008 with the idea of building a railroad to Brazil. Bolivia also gave the idea a boost by proposing a rail link between the Atlantic and the Pacific during a visit by Chinese President Xi Jinping in the year 2013. China was very open to investment as part of its Silk Road initiative and held out the prospect of partial financing. This was because China was just beginning to bind the countries of the Global South, particularly Africa and South America, more closely to itself through infrastructure projects. And with the prospect of financial support from China, feasibility studies soon began in South America too. These were mainly carried out by Bolivian companies with the support of some European companies. And after the successful preparation of various expert reports, the project was officially approved in the year 2015. On December 21 of the year 2015, the governments of Brazil, Chile, Argentina and Paraguay signed the Declaration of Asunción, a starting point for the transportation project. In this first agreement, the 4 countries agreed to expand major transnational infrastructures, i.e. roads, bridges, railroads and tunnels, while coordinating measures to facilitate the movement of people and goods. Bolivia and Peru later joined in. Brazil also signed a firm contract with China for the implementation, and the tendering process for the various sections began immediately. Germany also contributed generously to the project. Not only did the government invest, but a German-Swiss interest group consisting of various companies was also formed, which sought orders from the project for the railroad industry in these countries. And in the year 2017, Germany and Switzerland also signed a memorandum of understanding with Bolivia, whereby companies such as Siemens are to participate in the so-called Panama Canal of the current century. But what does the planned project look like in detail? In principle, a railroad line almost 4,000 kilometers long is to be built from the Atlantic to the Pacific, although there have been repeated disputes about the starting and end points. Initially, the project partners wanted to bypass Bolivia to the north due to various differences. However, due to political pressure from Bolivia and the ecological impact of construction in the Brazilian and Peruvian Amazon region, this was abandoned. Bolivia is now an integral part of the project, particularly because the route and therefore the costs can be significantly reduced. The currently planned route is as follows. Starting in the Brazilian port city of Santos, the route is to run through the tropical lowlands of Bolivia and reach the Pacific port of Ilo in Peru via the 4,000-meter-high Andes. In addition, branches are also to be built to surrounding countries such as Paraguay, Chile and Argentina. The project is no longer just about commercial benefits, but also about boosting tourism in the entire region. The aim is not only to simplify vacations in neighboring countries, but also to attract tourists from all over the world. Studies carried out to date on the potential impact on neighboring markets have produced promising results, both in economic and tourist terms. In addition to facilitating transportation from the Atlantic to the Pacific and vice versa, the corridor could also create some important value chains between these four countries. In particular, this involves the lucrative lithium mining for electric cars, which the EU is very keen on. But what exactly are the goals of the individual countries? Above all, Peru wants to position itself as an important hub for exports and imports from Asia. Currently, this trade mainly passes through Chilean ports, but by integrating into the corridor, it could overtake Chile. And it could also be better connected to the European Union as a result. Brazil, on the other hand, already has a good connection to Europe, but is particularly keen to increase trade with booming Asian markets such as China, India and Japan. And Bolivia is in a difficult geographical and economic situation due to its lack of access to the sea. For a long time, the country was therefore isolated from the international flow of goods. It even threatened Chile with war to regain its Pacific province, which it once lost. However, the new Bi-Oceanic Corridor would give Bolivia access to the sea again, and it is hoping for an economic upturn. This is because the modern infrastructure would also allow the country to be better connected internally. So we can see the great advantages this project would have for the countries, and it is therefore not surprising that the Transcontinental Railroad is now being compared to the Panama Canal in terms of its importance. To transport goods from Brazil to Peru, it currently takes either 25 days by ship around Cape Horn or 16 days by ship through the Panama Canal. However, the Bi-Oceanic Corridor could reduce the transportation time to just 4 days. And it could also play an important role in the exchange of goods between Europe and China. But despite all the euphoria, how is the project actually progressing? Initially very well. From the year 2017 construction work began on the first sections of the line, and some bridges, tunnels and sections have already been completed. However, the election of Bolsonaro as Brazilian president, who seemed to be averse to Peru and Bolivia, brought the construction work to a standstill. And the pandemic also interrupted implementation for a long time. The costs also turned out to be significantly higher than initially assumed, and there was a growing mistrust of China as a lender. And so, under Bolsonaro, Brazil once again focused more on the original alternative route, which was to run via Paraguay, Argentina and Chile. This means that two corridors are currently being worked on in parallel, some of which are in direct competition with each other. Brazil would benefit in both cases, but Bolivia and Peru are now in direct competition with Paraguay, Argentina and Chile. So we will probably only find out exactly where the corridor will run in the future in the next few years. The project was originally due to be completed by the year 2025, the bicentenary of Bolivia's independence, but it is already clear that it will be delayed by several years. What is certain, however, is that once completed, it would be an incredible boon to the South American economy and global trade.